forms of life have to have a way to process energy molecules like carbohydrates and fats into ATP. Most of the species we have discovered on Earth use one of two categories for cellular respiration: aerobic, meaning with oxygen, or anaerobic, meaning without oxygen. Here's an overview of aerobic respiration. You can see that the inputs are food and oxygen, and the outputs are carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Aerobic respiration is a series of reactions that we're going to boil down to three main steps. We're going to work through those steps by following the simple carbohydrate glucose through this process. The first stage is called glycolysis. Its job is to prepare glucose for the rest of the reactions. You can see in the diagram that glucose is broken in half during this phase. We call each of these halves pyruvates. The two pyruvates look like this. There's 3 carbons, 3 oxygens, and 3 hydrogens. Because the carbohydrate is broken down into 2 more stable molecules, a small net gain of ATP is derived from this reaction. Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell and doesn't require anything other than enzymes and ATP to facilitate it. In the second phase, the pyruvates move into the mitochondria, where they go through additional preparations for the cell cycle. You don't need to know about acetyl-CoA formation for this class. Instead, I'd like you to focus on the Krebs cycle as the second step. Inside the mitochondria, there are an assortment of enzymes that remove the hydrogens from the pyruvates, specifically their electrons. Hydrogen's electrons are where the energy is in our food, and what's left of the pyruvate after the Krebs cycle is carbon dioxide, which will escape as gas. Because the pyruvate is being broken down further, these reactions net 2 ATP. It would be a waste of energy to allow the electrons to diffuse away into the cytoplasm, so instead they're attached to electron carriers, NAD and FAD. These are cousins of NADP, the electron carrier you saw in the photoreactions of photosynthesis. They act just like NADP in that they work like taxicabs. In the Krebs, they accept electrons from pyruvates. NAD accepts 1, becoming NADH. FAD accepts 2, becoming FADH2. By nature, taxicabs move people from one destination to the next, and the same goes for electron carriers. In the final leg of cellular respiration, the electron carriers deliver their electrons to enzymes carrying oxygen. Oxygen is split into 2 single oxygen atoms, and then 2 electrons from our food combine with it to make water. Single oxygen atoms are very reactive, while water molecules are more stable. The formation of H2O is such a windfall of energy that 32 ATP are made from this process. In the end, the inherent energy in food is located in the electrons attached to their hydrogen atoms. When those combine with oxygen we breathe to make water, we generate lots of energy for work within cells. The total number of ATP molecules that carbohydrates generate in aerobic respiration is around 36. But carbs are not the only food molecule that can be respired in this way. Fats can be broken down to produce approximately 129 ATP, and in the absence of carbohydrates, amino acids from the protein we eat in our diet can be used. But be aware that burning amino acids could be taken away from the raw materials your cells need to make proteins. Remember, protein is not an energy molecule. Now, you may be wondering why fats generate more ATP than carbohydrates or protein. Recall that the energy in our food is located in the hydrogen atoms, specifically each hydrogen's electron. And you can see that the triglyceride, like one from butter, is going to have far more hydrogen atoms than either carbs or amino acids. Okay, so let's review. There are 3 steps that I'd like you to know about for aerobic respiration. First, glycolysis, which is the only reaction that takes place in the cytoplasm. Its role is to partially break down a food molecule. What it generates are 2 pyruvates and 2 ATP. Next is Krebs, whose job it is to remove the electrons from the pyruvates. It generates electrons and 2 ATP and carbon dioxide gas. Finally, the electron transport chain takes the electrons from food, combines them with oxygen to make water, which generates 32 or 129 ATP, depending upon which food molecule is being processed. You can see that the big payoff comes in the third step. The catch is that you have to have enough oxygen in your bloodstream for the electron transport chain to work. So how do we generate ATP when we are sprinting so hard that we're out of breath? For that, we have a backup pathway, anaerobic respiration. In anaerobic respiration, the pyruvates from glycolysis are made into lactic acid. This is a much quicker form of respiration since there's only one step, and it doesn't require mitochondria or oxygen. The downside is that it only generates 2 ATP. We can't run our metabolism solely on anaerobic respiration, but it is a great backup for when we're doing activities that require exertion. Carbohydrates and fats are not only excellent sources of energy, but they're also storable. ATP, on the other hand, is not storable and must be made on the spot to fuel our metabolisms. Our cells are continually processing carbohydrates and fats to meet our daily needs.